The men and the women have giant games this weekend. We dive deep into this. But first, let's vibe.
We are on Pirate Vibes. Happy 2026, by the way, as we're recording on New Year's Day. I'm Patrick Madden, of course. I'm filling in for Brian Webster, who, given that it's New Year's Day, but you will see him later on in this episode because he's got a few things he wants to say about the Seton Hall women's big matchup on Saturday afternoon up at Gampel Pavilion against the number one Connecticut Huskies. And I'm joined by Tim Best. Tim, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too, Pat. Little tired considering I watched the ball drop at midnight, and I don't think I went upstairs to finally call it a night. Playing a lot of Catan last night. I don't think I went up until like almost 2 a.m. But I was out like a light, and I woke up probably like right around 11. So I'm awake enough to gear up and bring the vibes up because vibes are high right now because women look great, men had a test but finished strong and took care of business. But we're going to touch all of that here on this episode, so let's get right into it, man.
Okay, we're going to start with the women this week because of the big matchup with Connecticut coming up on Saturday. We'll start with yesterday. Seton Hall played their second of two home games between Christmas and New Year's, taking on what we thought when we talked about Georgetown on our episode on Tuesday, what we thought was a good Georgetown team. And they might still be a good Georgetown team, but they did not look anything like it yesterday as Seton Hall rolled to an 81-36 victory at Walsh Gymnasium, the biggest win for a Seton Hall women's team in conference play. So if you saw a box score, you saw in the action, Tim, what are your first insights about what went well for the women's team yesterday?
Well, it starts on the defensive end. If you're holding anyone, doesn't matter how good or bad they are. Well, in this case, Georgetown is a relatively solid Big East squad. Middle of the pack, I think, in the league. They did beat Creighton, which Seton Hall's also done this year. Granted, Georgetown did it at home versus how the Pirates were able to do it in Omaha. But yeah, defensively, when you hold a team to less than a point a minute, you're doing something right on the defensive end. And then on top of that, I think their efficiency was really solid. Jada Eads was on fire to start the game, and they needed her to set the tone because, there were such high expectations for her coming into the season, and she has been underwhelming for most of it, but she shut down all of that in the early going of the game at Walsh on New Year's Eve. So I think Eads setting the tone, that really impressed me. She desperately needed that. And I think that set the tone for the rest of the team, for the rest of the game. And holding them to 13 points in the first half was also incredibly impressive. So I think it starts and ends with the defensive play, but the added caveat of Jada Eads setting the tone for this whole game with their strong start in the first quarter.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, and I think Eads wanted to prove a point because she has not had a series of great games going into the game she played yesterday. She struggled against Xavier on Sunday afternoon. She struggled in some of the action in December, and she's been banged up. She's been hobbling around. Her ankles have been in poor shape. She dealt with an illness in November, but Jada Eads is going to give you everything she's got, even if she's not at 100%. And I think she probably was a little bit healthier yesterday than she's usually been, and I think that's why you got the inspired effort. You got, of course, you mentioned the defense. I'm sure Tony Bozzella was, probably the happiest he's been, given that he's emphasized defense a lot this season. The one player that was basically a non-factor who had a huge game for Georgetown against Creighton on Sunday afternoon and has been establishing herself as one of the underrated players in the Big East was Destiny Agibata, who settled for 2 points and 6 rebounds for Georgetown, when I think her averages going into the game were closer to 6 and 5. And she had been someone who had been stepping up for Georgetown, had been giving them an inside presence, and Georgetown could get nothing on the interior. And they obviously missed their best 3-point shooter. I think her name is Rivera, because Georgetown couldn't get anything going on the perimeter either. Not only could they not get 3-point shots up, but Seton Hall seemed to have hands in every passing lane. Everyone on Seton Hall contributed. Eads, Catalon, Sahara Bishop, Shaylin Pinckney, Giordano Cudio, they all stepped up. I mean, this was the type of game I think that Tony Bozzella envisioned when he put this roster together in the offseason. So I think that's something he's got to be very encouraged by this performance going into, of course, their toughest matchup of the season, which is going up to Gampel Pavilion to take on the Gino Auriemma's defending national champion UConn Huskies. So what are your, I don't know how much of UConn you've watched. I don't know how much of UConn I've watched. Obviously, we've seen them blow a bunch of teams out. They also put a pounding on Providence yesterday afternoon up at this was Providence put this game up in the Amica Mutual Pavilion to try to draw a crowd in. Didn't really work. I mean, I don't think Providence had expectations of winning. I think 90-53, which was UConn's margin of victory yesterday, was actually a pretty good performance by Providence, given the fact that UConn had hammered Xavier and DePaul in their 2 previous Big East, and Butler. They had hammered all 3 of their opponents by more than 45 points. So what's your impression of Gino Auriemma's team going into the showdown on Saturday?
Okay, I could sum them up in less than 10 words. Actually, I'll do it in 5. They are a fucking wagon. They are so good. I mean, every single facet. We've seen some good, great UConn teams historically. With list goes on and on between Rebecca Lobo, Diana Taurasi, Sue Bird, Maya Moore, and obviously to the present day with Paige Beckers and now Azzi Fudd and Sarah Strong leading the way. I haven't been as impressed with a player in women's college basketball in a long time as I am with Sarah Strong. She does everything so well. And she really came out as a freshman, mind you, in the Final Four against UCLA and then South Carolina. She was the best player on the court in both of those games, even going up against 6'7" Lauren Betts from UCLA and going up against that very good South Carolina team. Dawn Staley's always had extremely good teams down at Columbia, but Sarah Strong punked them, both of them. And she's only gotten better as a sophomore. I know Azzi Fudd was the most outstanding player of the Final Four last year, but Sarah Strong was the best player during that Final Four run for the Huskies, and she's only continued that going into this season. And Azzi Fudd, to see her fully healthy, it's great for the game and it's great for this team because of how much time she's missed, how incredible of a scorer she is. And now she's added, running point to her repertoire, which has only made her even more dynamic of a player. But they have so much depth, so much talent across the board between not just Azzi, but you talk about KK Arnold, Ashlyn Shade, Jana El Alfi in the middle, Ice Brady coming off the bench. Yeah, they are so good, and they've proven that time and time again. I mean, and the laundry list of teams they've beaten out of conference, I mean, they always schedule tough out of conference. I think everyone knows that. But the teams they've beaten, they've only had one game that was really they let Michigan back in the game. That was the only game that it was a game to kind of worry about in the latter stages. But, they start off the year punking Louisville in the Armed Forces Classic. They've beaten Florida State, Ohio State, both of those games by 32, mind you. They beat UConn up at Mohegan Sun. Also won at South Florida. They crushed USC in LA, returning the home and home, and then against a top 15 Iowa team in the Champions Classic at the Barclays Center, they pounded them too. So, yeah, they're just loaded to the brim. I think they are far and away the best team in the country.
Yeah, I just want to drop in the name of their dynamic freshman, Bianca Quinones, as well. I don't want Connecticut fans to think we've ignored her because she's been one of the most fan favorites, once you get past Fudd and Strong, because she's got a similar dynamic in terms of her size and some of the abilities she brings to the table that Strong has. I mean, you put 2 6'2", positionless players like Strong and Quinones, who will conceivably, depending on what happens with the WNBA collective bargaining agreement. I mean, if they do open the doors a little bit and let, let's say sophomores and juniors into the draft, which would complicate things for Sarah Strong, because Strong could definitely start on any WNBA team right now and probably be a WNBA All-Star. I think that's the amount of talent and that's the skill set she has. In fact, I think no slight to Azzi Fudd, who I put a blog out over the last week regarding whether or not she would be the number 1 draft pick over Betts from UCLA and this woman from Spain, Awa Pham, a 6'4" stretch forward who is poised to also be a dominant WNBA force. But I think if Strong were part of the 2026 WNBA draft, I think she would be the number 1 pick going away because of her size, her ability to pass the ball, her ability to shoot, and everything else. And I think a lot of people in Connecticut think Quinones has a similar dynamic to Strong. And I think, look, it's the way it's been for Connecticut for 30 years. The chain just continues to go. The only difference is whether or not they fall back a little bit and let teams like South Carolina and Texas and some of the other schools that have made or USC, some of the other schools who have been the Final Fours and have been in contention for national championships, get back to their level. And I don't think we'll know how good Connecticut is until we get to the NCAA tournament, until they get to play South Carolina, Texas, and get to play UCLA again, because the one thing which is different about their schedule this year is that they don't have a non-conference matchup scheduled with South Carolina. Of course, much to the chagrin of the Connecticut fans who think that if they got to play South Carolina now, they would beat them and send the message for the NCAA tournament. I know that Mark Zanetto, who does a great job on the Hoops Cap podcast, did a whole episode about that when UConn's non-schedule came out during the summer. What do you think Seton Hall has to do to make this game competitive as long as they can on Saturday afternoon?
That is a great question. I mean,
or can they, for that matter?
Well, and that's for anybody. Like, can they? I mean, they, other than maybe one game, they have beaten the piss out of every team they played this year. And all these teams they played outside of, the Xaviers, DePauls, and Providences, and Butlers and Big East play. And the only non-conference slouch they played, per se, is Loyola Chicago. Other than that, like, they have played a tough non-conference. And I still consider South Florida respectable because their program has been pretty solid and was behind. When UConn was still in the American, USF was the next best team in the league for the vast majority of that. So, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, if you're Seton Hall, you got to defend well, make UConn take tough shots, and you just got to find a way to counter Sarah Strong and prevent her from – well, the thing of Sarah, what makes her so dynamic, if she's not killing you scoring the ball, she's killing you by finding her teammates and giving them open looks because she has so much attention drawn to them. That's going to make everyone forget about AZ and Shade and KK and the whole laundry list, and Quinones as well. So, yeah, they just got to defend well. Hope UConn misses some shots and try to turn them over because, in past years, UConn has kind of gotten themselves into trouble with not protecting the basketball well. So if Seton Hall can cause some havoc and force some turnovers, they're going to have to score off those turnovers to put the Huskies back on their heels. But, that's obviously easier said than done.
I'll name you one player on Seton Hall I think needs to have a big effort to make this game somewhat competitive, and that's the transfer Mariana Valenzuela.
Okay.
Valenzuela had a big game against Xavier, is coming off being named Big East Player of the Week last week, by the way. She can score on the inside. She can score on the outside. She's a very good rebounder. She didn't quite have her three-point shot yesterday. Didn't need it because everyone else on the team seemed to be able to score at will against Georgetown. But again, she's someone who she doesn't quite have the athletic ability of Sarah Strong, but she does. You do have to keep honest with her because she can beat you inside, and if Eads and Catalon can set her up properly, she can beat you outside. So she might be someone who she might give Connecticut some fits defensively because of her offensive versatility. And of course, Savannah Catalon's another player who I think should be fired up for this game because she is all Big East. She would like to think she's on the same level as an Azzi Fudd or a Kaylin Heckel, who's another transfer for Connecticut. I think she'd like to be in the conversation with women like that. And I think that, if I expect her to, I expect everyone on Seton Hall to come out 100% for this game. Because if you can't come out 100% for a game against the number one team in the country, the best team in your conference, and the defending national champions, you don't belong in a basketball court. So I expect Catalon to put out something. I'd like to see Catalon get to the foul line a lot. She does. We talked about it earlier this week that she's very good at drawing fouls. And I think if she can draw fouls and get a lot of easy points from the foul line, that could be something that might make this game a little more respectable than the two games they played against Connecticut last year. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens on Saturday. As we said before earlier in this episode, Brian's going to jump in towards the end of this episode and give you his thoughts about the Seton Hall UConn game. In the meantime, when we come back after the break, we will talk about the men who scored their own impressive victory in a way on Tuesday and have their own watershed game coming up on Sunday afternoon at the Prudential Center. We're back. Now we're going to switch over to the men who scored an impressive. Look, let's put it this way. As bad as Marquette has played this season, Marquette still, as you watched on Tuesday night, Marquette still has talented players. And you're still playing that game up in the Pfizer Forum in Milwaukee, which has been a tough place for any Big East team to score a win, never mind Seton Hall. So the win, 79-73 on Tuesday night against Marquette, even though Marquette is down and might soon be out in terms of their hopes for this season, is still something that Seton Hall can hang its hat on. When you get the Big East play, and you can vouch for this, Tim, a win is a win. You don't look at a team like Marquette, who a lot of people think is going to come in last and might only win 2 or 3 Big East games. They still mean something. And you also don't want to get a loss hung at you, particularly because Seton Hall is still harboring at-large NCAA hopes. So what were your impressions of Tuesday night's come-from-behind victory against Shaka Smart's Golden Eagles?
Well, there were a couple of things. Number one, I'm still flabbergasted that Seton Hall did not turn Marquette over once in that entire first half. Still led by 1. So that I felt good about that. Like, they'll turn them over in the second half, score off them, and it'll be a runaway. Well, unfortunately, the good news is they forced some turnovers. The bad news is it was on the other side where Marquette went up double digits at multiple points in the second half. And I'm sitting at home like, oh God, here we go. Like, are we Like, are we going to be down in the dumps now? Like, did the Villanova loss break us? But the thing, what I loved, in the post-game video, the content that, shout out to my guy, Matt Ambrose and Keith Egan, putting the content together of them in the locker room after the game. Shaw said, good teams find a way to win. And Seton Hall's a good team. They found a way to win. Yeah. Was it ugly? You bet your sweet ass it was. However, when you're down 7 with 3 minutes left, a lot of teams, they'll think, it's over. 3 minutes on the road, down by 7, considering, how things really have shifted towards Marquette's favor, and you were out of your element with not, forcing as many turnovers as you personally would have liked, well below your season average, but still finding a way to win. Free throw shooting kept them in the game. Their ability to get big shots to fall, and big free throws for that matter, to fall when it mattered the most. Getting certain plays to go in their favor, like Trey Parker getting fouled on that 3 in the corner when it was a 73-69 game. And then not just him getting fouled, but then making all 3 shots after that to get it down to 1 was huge. And I think it partially led to Tawan Simpkins getting that steal and layup on the other end of the court. And I think Marquette's mistakes eventually caught up to them as well. They had 12 missed layups. They have by far and away the most missed layups per game amongst power conference teams. So it all came back around, in my opinion. And it was crazy to see Ben Gold, a guy that we really didn't talk about much in the preview and who has been quiet most of the season. Of course, just our luck, he has a monster game. And what shocks me also is the fact that, Seton Hall made a dumb challenge in the first half and they lost that for the rest of the game. Marquette challenged later in the half, and it was a great challenge, and they retained the challenge. I don't think they challenged at any point the rest of the game, and I'll commend the refs. There were some blips where I'm like, what are we doing out here? And with the inconsistency, what's being called on one end versus the other. But I will say that Pat Driscoll's crew, I will commend them. I thought they did a really good job. It sucks I'm saying it for Big East standards. They did a really good job on Tuesday night. And I know I rag on refs all the time, but I will say that Driscoll and his crew, I thought they did a solid job on this game. But yeah, good teams found a way to win. Seton Hall found a way to win, despite the fact that they were well below average in a lot of the elements of the game that makes them as good as they are. So I'm curious as to what you got on the other end of that, Pat.
Let's talk about 3 players. Obviously, you start with Stefan Payne, who dominated on the inside. 14 points, an unbelievable 22 rebounds. Marquette is not a great rebounding team. They haven't been a great rebounding team under Shaka Smart, and Payne capitalized. What Payne did, which was different than what happened against Villanova last week, was that he went straight up with most of his. Now, I know one of the things we talked about, but the 3 of us, between Brian, you and I talked about, was how few second chance points Seton Hall got. But the fact that Seton Hall got second chance points at all is a testament to just how dominant Payne was on the inside. And Payne played 32 minutes, which, he, on the one hand, he kind of had to because Najee Hines was coming back after a two-week absence because of an injury. Godswill Aaron didn't see the court on Tuesday night, so he kind of had to take that role. But one thing Holloway did very well, particularly late in that game, was went with a set rotation. And you mentioned Trey Parker already. He was part of that group. Bud Clark was great, particularly in the last 5 minutes of the game, playing good defense. He was able to play looser on defense in Tuesday night's game because he wasn't in foul trouble. Yeah. He had only thrown 2 fouls up to that point. So he could be a little more aggressive. And I think he was a little more aggressive. Then you go to TJ Simpkins, or Taquan Simpkins, I apologize, Tawan, who was off most of this game. But when Seton Hall needed him the most, he was there. He hit a big three, I think, to cut the lead, I think, from 7-4.
Yeah.
And then he makes the steal and the end drive down to give Seton Hall the lead with a little more than a minute to go. So between Payne, Clark, and Simpkins, as well as Elijah Fisher, who played most of those final minutes and made a couple of nice plays himself and hit a couple of big foul shots, by the way, that I think that he made the game from a 3-point game to a 5-point game after Ben Gold fouled out, which was important. And of course, Trey Parker, who, it's funny, a lot of people during this game were basically saying they don't want to see Trey Parker on the court anymore because Parker continued to struggle when he was playing the point in this game. I think there's no slight to Parker, of course. He's only a sophomore, so it's going to take him a while to figure out, how to run the point. But when you played him with Clark in the backcourt, he did a great job, by the way, of slowing down Marquette's Nigel James, who was dominating in the first half and was a non-factor in the second half. He also did a pretty good job in the opportunities he had when he was defending against Chase Ross, who Chase Ross broke out a little bit in this game and helped Marquette build that double-digit lead midway through the second half. But then Chase Ross did not have it in the final minutes because players like Parker and Fisher and Clark made him work for everything he was getting in the last 7 or 8 minutes of that game. I think one of the point was Marquette didn't score a field goal in the last 6 minutes of the game. And I don't care what type of lead, unless you have like a 20-point lead and the game's basically you're in garbage time at that point. Very few teams don't go the last 6 minutes without hitting a field goal and come up with a W. And that's what happened to Marquette on Tuesday night, unfortunately, to continue their struggles along. And of course, Seton Hall now up to 12-2. They matched their Big East win total from last season with 2, which, we make it. It's a funny statement to say that, but, that means something given how everything that's happened this season so far has to be put in comparison to how far down Seton Hall was. That's sort of the narrative about how Seton Hall has made a big comeback in the 2025-26 season, thanks to the players, thanks to the coaches. Ryan Whalen, who's the other guy who was in that video? Yes, I forgot what his name was. I feel stupid. Corey.
Oh my God! Why am I? Hold on a sec. I know some of the other coaches that I know Kevin Lynch, he's back at the Hall.
He's at the division of, it's Corey Lowry.
Corey Lowry, yep.
Corey, you see the video of Lowry, I think, pumping them up, making that comment, find a way to win, regardless of what happens. I think that's something, I think they said that I think he said that, and the way the video you referenced point out that he said that in the under 4 minutes to go huddle.
Yeah.
And that's just something I think, look, I mean, the reality is that when you only win 7 games, you don't look as good as when you win 12 or your first 14 games. As much as the players have something to do with it, as much as you have to get breaks to go 12-2, it's also a reflection. I mean, we knew this coaching staff was good because they had that. They worked well together 2 years ago when Seton Hall won the NIT. Whalen has been Holloway's right-hand man from the St. Peter's days. So we know this is a good coaching staff. It's just having the players in place to make the decisions they make in terms of strategy, in terms of motivation, look good.
Yeah, so a couple of things I wanted to mention. I know that, the fans have been, ragging on Trey Parker, but let's all remember when Seton Hall was down 55-45, just under 12 minutes left. Trey Parker hit a huge 3, and I was worried. I'm like, I thought it was like an ill-advised shot, but as I came to see, he shot that in rhythm, and that was a confident take from Trey Parker, a guy who had only been shooting, 23% from three, they said on the broadcast, and he knocked down a big shot, and they needed him to have a strong performance, considering the fact that Mike Williams didn't have his best stuff. Elijah Fisher had a really off night. And then on top of that, State McCray, he had a great first half, but then was MIA the second half, and that's why you needed Simpkins to step up, Parker to step up. Josh Rivera had another great game, and on top of that, even though Hines only played 8 minutes, he was really good in those 8 minutes with 6 points, a couple dunks, a couple blocks, even went 2 for 2 from the line. And what also really impressed me, their ability to shoot free throws, especially in the second half with those stupid-ass, wacky-waving, inflatable arm shoot, man, which I'm pretty sure is against NCAA rules. Like you can't have them actively moving like that. Like, I think, like, at Seattle University, they have that, like, giant inflatable, like, hawk in like, the corner of the gym, but he's stationary. So Marquette, they blatantly committed an NCAA, like, rules violation or something like that, but I digress. If anything, I think it helps.
Feel like going to buy a new car after watching those inflatables, Tim?
And I could use myself a brand new Hyundai Tucson or something like that. I don't know, man. But I, honestly, if anything, I think that helped him shoot free throws better in the second half on that end of the court. And for Stephon Payne, who was really bad from the line coming into this game, for him to go 8 for 12 and making several crucial free throws, like, I think that's what helped Seton Hall stay in the game rather than it kind of like, you miss a free throw and then Marquette goes on the other end and gets 2 or even 3 out of it. Seton Hall was able to capitalize on missed free throws from Marquette. And, I mean, holding them to 30% from behind the arc, 37% from the game, and the fact that Ben Gold had to have the kind of game that he did, I can't help but be happy with Seton Hall pulling this win out from the jaws of defeat. Again, I know we're beating a dead horse here, but this is Marquette. The talent they have, I don't think it should be really indicative of their record because they have talent, as we saw. Pace Ross, who had been really slumping, he had the kind of performance that Shaka and this team and these fans from Marquette were expecting. Ben Gold came out of nowhere. Everyone from Marquette, from their fan base, has really been getting on Ben Gold's case for being soft and not being as good as expected. Like, he showed up Tuesday night. Nigel James, I mean, he put I think he put Hines on skates at one point. He particularly really impressed me. And knowing Shaka, he'll have him for the foreseeable future. Unless, God forbid, the culture changes with Marquette, and maybe Shaka does dip into the portal because of the last success for this year. But again, that remains to be seen.
You wouldn't want to replace Nigel James, that's for sure. I mean, James,
yeah, exactly.
James gave me Tyler Kolek vibes a little bit.
I can see that.
I mean, that's how good I think Nigel James can be. So I think the culture thing. I'm going to be dropping an article, I think, tomorrow about Marquette's situation, because I do think that it's the dynamic is going to be interesting over there. Of course, there were a couple of Marquette fans who also dropped the "Is it time to get rid of Shaka Smart" narratives, which I think you can't do it, as we learned at Seton Hall situation, you can't do it based on one bad year. I think you do have to give Smart the opportunity to make some adjustments given the nature. And they not only have some talent. I mean, Royce Parham's still a very good player. They're going to have for another couple of years. I think they have a lot of high hopes for Adrian Stevens, who didn't do much on Tuesday night, except that one travel with like a minute 20 to go. But I think they do have some people. They do have some players in the pipeline who look good. Smart's recruited a decent class of 2 or 3 pretty good players for next season. So it'll be interesting to see what Marquette does. Of course, we'll revisit that topic. I think we play Marquette at the end of January. But now we transition over to a game bigger than a lot of people thought when Big East play started, and that's when the dreaded Creighton Bluejays come into the Prudential Center Creighton, of course, getting off to the 3-0 start.
Pep, one last thing about Shaka Smart with the Marquette fans wanting him gone. Like, if Steve Wojciechowski could stay for 7 years, you shouldn't be asking for Shaka to get the boot after 5. Like, that's just delusional. That's all. Just gonna leave it at that. Come on.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that if you're trying to compare Smart to Wojciechowski, that's a mismatch. I think Smart has, based on his VCU days and based on the beginning of his tenure at Marquette, he has definitely earned the right to get another season. Of course, that doesn't necessarily carry the day. College basketball is weird like that with coaches, but I'll be rooting to see Marquette try to get themselves at least back in position when they're not playing Seton Hall. So on to Creighton. Nice win on Tuesday night in a tough one against Butler out in Omaha, 89-85. They've already pummeled Marquette by 20 points, and they really pummeled Xavier. I think that was by 30 points?
41
points. It was even worse than I thought. I watched most of that game against Xavier a couple of weeks ago. 98-57. I mean, this is Creighton has, as they tend to do when we get the conference play. Greg McDermott has this team figured out. I think it took them a while to adjust to the loss of Jackson McAndrew, their sophomore, who was poised to maybe get in position to be an all Big East player this season. But the revelation on this team has been a freshman named Austin Swartz, who has just blown up in Big East play, along with they've gotten some better play from their transfer from Charlotte guard Nick Graves. And the guy who's really impressed me, who last year was almost a non-entity for them, was Isaac Trout, the 6'10" guy who makes Creighton fans forget they even had McAndrew. So what are your impressions of what you've seen from Creighton heading into the showdown in Newark on Sunday afternoon?
So, yeah, looking at how they did in the early portion of the season, it blows my mind to see Creighton playing as well as they did, considering that they lost to the same Kansas State team that Seton Hall beat just a week prior to when that game happened. And that was in Omaha, where Creighton lost by 7. They really looked pretty bad for most of that game. And, I mean, look, what's their record? 9-5? Yeah, they're 9-5 right now. And 5 of those losses, I mean, Nebraska whooped them. But as we've come to find out, Nebraska's a pretty damn good team. And winning at Pinnacle Bank Arena now, as we've seen in recent years, it's a lot more difficult to come by. I mentioned Kansas State. They lost to Gonzaga. Boat raced them, but Gonzaga looks like a top 10 team right now. Iowa State and Baylor also beat them. So, I mean, it's not like they've lost to some bum teams, with the exception of Kansas State. I think that's the one exception. Even then, Kansas State isn't. They're bottom level in the Big 12, but they're not. It's not like they're god awful. So
yeah, you gotta keep our best road win. You gotta keep in mind that's our best road win, Tim. So
trust me, now. I'm trying, but I'm also trying to keep it real and keep it 100. But ever since that game, yeah, they have just been on a heater. Let's ignore the Utah Tech game because that shouldn't really count for anything. But if you look at the 3 Big East games they've won, the first 2 games, their combined margin of victory was 62 points. So they've been winning their first 3 Big East games by an average of 22 points per game, and they are averaging just a hair over 90 per game in Big East play to start things out. And we all know that Butler's a really good offensive team, and they were able to get points on the board and scare Creighton a little bit. But I give credit to, Jason Green was outstanding in this game as well, putting up 23 points. That's a guy who, Greg McDermott was expecting big things out of this year, considering he's a junior. And I still remember the game against Oregon in the tournament a couple of years ago where Green had that nasty putback dunk. And I think it was in the second overtime where they pulled away. I'm like, damn, this kid's going to be good. And he has become one of their top guys. Looking at and they're really well balanced. That's what really impressed me. Like Dix and Green are averaging double digits. They're the only two averaging double figures. However, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9. Well, okay. Okay. I was gonna say 9 other guys, but then again, I just took a look at how many games they played. That includes Jackson McAndrew, as well as Josh Townley Thomas. I mean, in terms of the guys that are regularly playing, they still got five other guys that are averaging at least 7.5 a game. So they know how to put the ball in the hoop. They are diverse in the sense that they have multiple guys who can put the ball in the bucket, and they got the high hand with Austin Swartz. You know, in Big East play, he's averaging almost 20 a night, which is really saying something. And then Trout has been great to start Big East play as well. It seems like his three-point shooting has really he's found his three-point stroke. And it started with that Kansas State game that they lost. So they're a Creighton team that's on fire and a team that, you know, they know how to win at the Rock. And it's crazy to me that Shaheen Holloway is yet to beat Creighton during his tenure at the Rock. I mean, how can we not forget that? Was it double or triple overtime?
Oh yeah, the triple overtime game 2 years ago. Oh my God, I'm never gonna forget that one. Wow, that game had every twist and turn under the sun, and you know, as much as you like to see a close game, I'd hope that we don't get a game. Obviously, you don't want to lose that game.
Oh yeah,
but you know, you'd hope that you would sort of hope that Seton Hall can find a way to, you know, at least get a win, even like a win like the game against Tuesday. One guy we haven't mentioned is Owen Freeman, transfer from Iowa. Started the season injured, had to work himself back into playing shape, has never really found his groove this season. But Freeman, in a sense, could be a matchup problem for Seton Hall, in the sense that he can do damage on the inside and the outside. And one thing, of course, which Seton Hall has struggled at times with this season is pick and roll or pick and pop, defending the pick and roll and the pick and pop, and how the switches take place. And the possibility that either Freeman's going to have an opportunity to, as great as Payne has been, as great as Hines have been, you know, are they going to be able to stay in front of Freeman if Freeman decides to tackle to go attack the basket? That's a guy who, again, you know, sort of if you compare him to Ben Gold in terms of, for lack of a better term, a sleeping giant, you know, with what Freeman did at Iowa last season, and what people were expecting of Freeman going into this season, you know, Freeman's going to break out at some point, and hopefully it happens after Sunday's game. You know, of course, then you've got the guys who are on a roll right now. We mentioned those guys already. You know, any of them could go off for 20, 25 points and make things interesting. Of course, the one thing I think which Seton Hall has an advantage on with Creighton is our athleticism and our ability to disrupt passing lanes. Because Creighton does not kill you on the dribble. Creighton basically looks to rotate the ball, you know, three or four quick passes leads to an open shot. And the question becomes whether or not Seton Hall can find a way to disrupt some of that action between Clark, Fisher, Stanton McCray, Parker, Williams. Can those guys get into enough passing lanes, deflect enough passes, and throw off the machine that the Creighton offense has been, at least through the beginning of Big East play? So what are some things you're hoping that Seton Hall is able to do in order to pull out a win against what has become a very good Creighton team, and a Creighton team which now has realistic NCAA at-large hopes?
Yeah, I think that with the Blue Jays, the let it fly mentality has become a bit of a unsolvable riddle for this Seton Hall team in past years. I will say that I bet Shaheen Holloway is so happy he doesn't have to deal with Ryan Kalkbrenner anymore. And Stephen Ashworth, for that matter. Much more Kalk than Ash, but the points definitely still stands. Maybe Shaw feels a lot better that like he can game plan much better because he doesn't have to worry about that big 7'1" redwood causing havoc on the interior and then popping out to knock down a 3 or 2 since he had that in his arsenal. And then with Ashworth just with how hot he can get shooting the 3. I don't think that anyone on this Creighton team has that level of that kind of capability where they can just rattle off 4 or 5 threes in a row, like certain guys in the past, like Doug McDermott, Ethan Wragge, that just to name drop a couple to show the Blue Jay fans that I actually know ball. So yeah, they got to defend the 3 well, first and foremost. They have been towards the lower half of teams nationally with defending the 3, but they got back on track against Marquette, holding them to just 30% from behind the arc and holding them to single digits in 3-point makes. I think if you're going to beat Creighton, I think there has to be a quota. Like you can't allow X amount of threes in order to win this game. I think,
or you got to take bad ones and contest them.
Yes.
If Creighton goes 11 for 40 from 3, that's a good number because that's way below what your expected efficiency would be on a 3. You got to make them take threes that they're going to miss and cause a lot of empty trips. Of course, then you've got to handle the defensive boards, but Seton Hall's been pretty good at preventing offensive rebounds more nights than not this season. So on the one hand, not worried about that. On the other hand, any given game, you could see that come to the fore. Again, Friedman can rebound a little bit. Schwartz can rebound. I'm gonna screw his name up because I'm looking for that CH in there. It's Schwartz. Schwartz is a good athlete. Green's a good athlete, as you mentioned. So they have some guys who can get up and maybe get some rebounds. Some freakish things happen in games like this. So do we want to make a prediction on this game?
I got a weird feeling we're going to get a thriller at the Rock, something that Seton Hall fans can hopefully hang their hat on. I think the big thing is, like, Seton Hall has done a great job of holding teams below their scoring average, although they barely kept Marquette below their scoring average. The funny thing is, last episode, the other score I was mulling over in my head before settling on 73-68 was 76-70. So I would have had the 6-point margin correct, and I would have only been off by 3 points on both sides. So I'm hoping that this one will fare better, but I think it's going to be a thriller, and I think the wrong of 2024 with that triple overtime game not going in the Pirates' favor won't need overtime this time around, but I think Seton Hall will pull it out, and it's going to be a close one, 69-68. Pirates get it done in a thriller. And I think the hero of this game, I think it's going to be Bud Clark. I think Bud has become the closer of this team. I think he's going to find a way with his agility and his craftiness to be able to create, a shot with time winding down in the mid-range, stop and pop. And, he struggled so much with that the last time they played at the Rock against Villanova. Unlike that game, this time he'll actually knock this mid-range down to give the Pirates a thrilling 1-point win in the Prudential Center.
I'm going to go 82-75 Seton Hall. And the guy I'm expecting to be the game changer is A.J. Stanton-McCray.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I don't know if Creighton has the defensive capability to contain Seton Hall's wings. That's the one thing. I mean, Butler plays good offense, but you still gave up 85 points against them.
Yep.
And I think Seton Hall, as much as their offensive efficiency is not as high, we've seen Seton Hall play efficient offense this season. And I think that if Creighton can't defend anything on Sunday afternoon, Seton Hall is going to play enough defense in order to slow Creighton down enough where Seton Hall will end up scoring more points. Of course, again, you have to be careful that Creighton just doesn't continue their momentum, their steamroller from the end of December and carry it into January. but I think Seton Hall will find a way to play enough defense on Sunday and will be able to score the ball enough on Creighton in order to pull out a 2 or 3 possession win on Sunday afternoon.
Two Power Fives, as we can see that we kind of have a broken up episode here. Let's talk about the most dangerous compliment in women's basketball today. The Geno vote. For this season, the preseason coaches poll in the Big East Media Day came out with a familiar look. UConn won. Everybody knew that was going to happen. But Geno can't vote for his own team, so everyone looks forward to who's the team that he's given that vote to. He has to pick a challenger. This year, for the first time, he put that target squarely on Tony Pizzella and the Seton Hall Pirates. Now, history tells us this isn't a gesture of friendship. It's a death warrant. Since UConn returned back to the Big East, every team Geno has honored with that first-place vote, since they've gotten every other first-place vote, they've systematically dismantled for the most part. 2021, he voted for DePaul. The Huskies didn't just beat him. They dropped 100 on him. 2022, he voted for Villanova. You know what they did? They swept them 3 times, including beating them down in the Big East tournament final. 2024, he went with Creighton, and they beat him by 29 in the Big East championship. Geno uses his ballot, I feel, to tell his players, this is who the world thinks can beat you. And the worst part is their stars take that very personal. Because historically, they just erase the competition. Now, they talked about, Tim and Pat talked about Sarah and Azzi Fudd and Bianca. And those players are talented. Sarah Strong was my preseason player of the year if you watch Big East Beat here on the Big East Energy Network. She's shooting 58% from the field. 6'2" point forward. She's going to run, and she's going to outmuscle you. Then Azzi Fudd is a walking basket when she catches and shoots. And they're so deep. So is it over before it even starts? If you ask Tony Pizzella and his staff and his players, they're going to say no. Geno gave Seton Hall that vote for a reason. The Pirates are playing with some of the most inspired basketball in Welsh gym history. Here's some things that you got to remember. The Eads factor. Eads is a certified bucket. We've seen it all year. Even though she's the smallest one on the court, she's going to rebound. She's averaging nearly 5 rebounds a game at 5'7", and like I said, the smallest person on Seton Hall. She's averaging 14 points nearly. She was all Big East last year, all Metro. She played tough competition this year against Instant State, who most see as the most talented team they played so far. And she scored 16 points again, and I was there, and she was just fearless. And my wife, who really doesn't watch basketball, and she's like, they're really good, even though she's the smallest. And she's telling my 12-year-old daughter to pay attention to her because she's able to get a bucket, and then it doesn't matter if she's being guarded by 6'1" dogs, you know? Another thing that Seton Hall has going for him is the chaos defense. Seton Hall currently is one of the best defensive units in this country. They just gave up only 36 points to Georgetown the other day, the fewest in program history. They're forcing 20 turnovers a game consistently. Savannah Catalon, everybody knows that's our lead pirate. Is leading the conference with steals. They've got to make UConn's guards uncomfortable. Is that impossible? No. Is it a tough challenge? Yes. And another thing about this team is they seem to be focused on getting over the humps, right? Cam Russ came on here about a month ago, not even with the team for technically a game yet, or nearly a couple games at that time. And she talked about Creighton. She's looking forward to Creighton. Well, 2 weeks ago, they just beat Creighton. Shea Pickney comes off the bench as a career high. It seems like they've got a task. But here's the thing. Seton Hall is Jersey tough. Pizzella has built a culture. We talk about it every single week that we talk about the women's team. that thrives on being the underdog. He doesn't want your respect. He wants your lunch money. The Pirates may be the only team in this conference that defensively can survive a 40-minute track meet with the Huskies. It's a big ask. It's a big ask for anyone, South Carolina included, Texas included. So is it going to be a challenge? Am I saying they're not even par? No. But if the Big East is going to get a win over UConn, Seton Hall might be the best option. Then you got Mariana Valenzuela. How is she going to match up with Sarah Strong and their bigs? The team obviously dropped points. They dropped 81 on Georgetown, and it wasn't 30 points from one player. It was spread about. Geno didn't give Seton Hall the first place vote because he wanted to be nice and polite to his Italian brotherhood. He gave it because he knows that if his team is 5% off their game, the Pirates are the type of squad that can knock them off. No other the Pirates ended up third in that preseason poll that I referenced at the beginning. Obviously, the Huskies were unanimous. We're going to call it unanimous because if everyone voted for you except the one that can't, it's unanimous. But they finished third, and a lot of those tiebreakers, or they got them higher up in that poll, was because of Geno's vote. So this is the target on the Pirates' back. But remember, a Pirate is most dangerous when they're cornered. So Seton Hall, the women's team, the floor is yours. Don't just show up. Make them remember why we're the ones Geno picked. This is going to be a huge ask. Am I coming on here, Pirate Vibes, and saying that they're going to knock off UConn? No, I'm not. They haven't done it since, what, 1994? I don't even know if Bozzella had his first head coaching job yet. I know I was 10, 12. I was 12 years old the last time I believe that Seton Hall women beat the UConn Huskies. This is the best program in the country. We know this. We know that this is going to be a challenge. Bozzella came on here in July and said that you've got to compete, even though the game was close last year. One of the games was close last year through 3 quarters or 2.5 quarters. The metrics did not look great because that 4th quarter was terrible. You need a complete 4-quarter competition. Before you can worry about a victory, you got to be able to compete all 4 quarters because UConn's not going to let it. Is Seton Hall the type of team that could scare UConn? Yeah, they could, but UConn hasn't been scared yet this year, and you know their non-conference is a tough one. You know that Geno's got them prepped. You know this team is so deep. You know that if outside of Crooks out there in Iowa State, it's a runaway that Sarah Strong is going to be Player of the Year. And if not, it probably would be Azzi Fudd that would be up there with Crooks. Like they've got 2 of the top 3 right now that I would consider front runners of Player of the Year. So this is a challenge. This is a challenge for Azzi Catalon to prove that they're Big East backcourt too. This is a challenge for Zahara Bishop and the other freshmen that get an opportunity to come on and say, you know what, I'm going to go against the best. This is a big challenge for Mariana Valenzuela, right? Playing down in Florida State, that's nice, cute. And now you're playing the best. There isn't a team in the ACC that comes close to what UConn brings. Let's be honest. Messiah Hunter, let's see what the growth is there for her. Savannah Jones, if she gets in. Cam Russ, if she gets in. Right? Pickney, right? She's from Connecticut. She's going home. She's right across the river in East Hartford. This is a big matchup for the team in a whole. Am I expecting a victory? Probably not. I would love a victory because we get to come on here and we get to talk all. And UConn fans love this channel, and I appreciate them. And me being from Connecticut, it's an honor to talk in front of women's basketball to UConn fans on this channel. But I'm riding with the Pirates, and they've got to be able to compete. and they've got to be able to match up for 4 quarters. They can't go with a 50-point loss. They can't get done to them what they just did to Georgetown. The momentum's moving forward. If they're able to compete with UConn, get a win against Nova, beat the rest of the Big East, compete with UConn, I can't tell you why this team is not a March team. They jumped some steps, taking over Georgetown, who was close to them in the net at the time. Beating Creighton, who jumped a ton after beating a couple crap teams by 30 points at home. They just got to keep the momentum, and they can't take a big fallback right now. Anyways, leave your predictions below. We'll come back on here next week. The Creighton game for the men, absolutely huge. Big weekend for Seton Hall basketball in general. Pat spoke about it with Tim. Unfortunately, I wasn't available. It was New Year's Day. Wife had me run around doing a bunch of things, and then I wanted to watch a little bit of the playoff, and it time constraints, so we get to do this and piece it together. I told him I'd come on here and rant, a web rant, a vibe check. I don't know what we're going to call it. I don't know if the nickname will come out next episode. But anyways, this is Power Vibes on the Big East Energy Network. I'm Brian Webster, Pat Madden, Tim Best. They were here. Stay true, stay blue, and vibe on.
Ahoy there! Ahoy, me hearties!